And it's about that dawn of freedom that I want to speak to you today. It's exactly what's happening now that President Trump is back in the White House. The United States is once again the shining city upon a hill to which the UK and indeed the world will once look for leadership, for courage, and for freedom. For us in the United Kingdom, our jewels of liberty, aspiration, and prosperity lie buried under the weight of socialism, the shackles of political correctness, and the feebleness of our political class. It's now for us in the UK to look enviously from the outside in, from the doghouse of international relations. As the world seems to be waking up from its woke nightmare, be it the United States, Italy, or Argentina, we in the UK have a government that is more anti-freedom, anti-aspiration, anti-hope, and anti-opportunity than ever before. The contrast couldn't be starker. As other countries rediscover the keys to economic growth, we in the UK stand on the brink of a recession, job losses and businesses going bust. Under Keir Starmer, the United Kingdom is now more likely than ever to worship at the altar of punitive net zero policies, bend the knee at the cross of a distorted notion of human rights, and submit to the will of supranational institutions rather than standing up for the UK's national security and long-term allies. And that is why, and I regret to say it, but as Donald Trump assumes office for this generation-defining presidency and Keir Starmer stumbles from one crisis to another, it is abundantly clear that the historic and much vaunted special relationship between the UK and the US, one which has endured since the horrors of World War II, was strengthened during the Cold War and formed the defining alliance against Islamist extremism after 9/11, now lies in tatters. On the international order, Trump is putting the sovereign national interest first. He recognises that the multilateral globalist structures of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations and the Davos cliques have had their day and are actively harming our people. Whilst he pulls out of the corrupt, conflicted and incompetent World Health Organization, the UK is increasing our funding to this outmoded organisation. Whilst Trump is reinforcing your southern border and demanding that other countries do their fair share to fight the global migration crisis, Keir Starmer worships at the altar of the Strasbourg Human Rights Court and scraps the Rwanda scheme, which would have stopped the boats. Whilst Trump deports thousands, Starmer appoints an Attorney General who would rather represent Jerry Adams and Shamima Begum than put the UK national interest first. It's why I keep arguing that the UK must leave the European Convention of Human Rights, scrap the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act if we are to fix the crisis on our southern border. Now, as Home Secretary, every single day I fought to put Britain first. I didn't win all of my battles, but I saw the damage that uncontrolled mass immigration was doing to our country. And when I tried to do something about it, through a strong border or leaving the European Convention of Human Rights or lowering net migration, devastating figures have just been released today, by the way, in the UK on projected net migration, I was challenged, of course, by the usual left-wing opponents. That's par for the course. But what was staggering was that I was actually blocked from delivering these changes by fellow Conservatives in the Cabinet and in my party. You could call them the Conservatives in name only, chinos. I think you know them as rhinos here. You see, too many of my fellow Conservatives, and they don't like hearing this, but I will keep saying it until I see that my party has changed, have historically seen high levels of immigration as good for the economy. They fail to grasp that GDP has been sluggish throughout the decade of unlimited and unprecedented migration. And they've chosen to overlook the really important metric, GDP per capita. Never mind the costs of spiralling low-cost, low-skilled migration on our public services or our communities. Never mind the fact that the UK population has now exceeded the French population and is set to increase to 72.5 million by 2032, nothing less than a population explosion for a country the size of the United Kingdom. And they've been scared as well of tackling the empire of human rights that stopped us from deporting illegal migrants to Rwanda. They swallowed the Kool-Aid on woke far too often. It was Conservative MPs who took the knee after George Floyd. There were Conservative MPs who confessed to white privilege. And there were Conservative MPs who declared that a trans woman is a woman. It was Conservative MPs who said that talking about the rape gangs was Islamophobic. Even just a few months ago, after our devastating defeat, when you think many of my colleagues would have learnt, there were too many Conservative politicians who were campaigning for Kamala. As one of the very few Tories who actually publicly declared their support for Trump before the election, there's a lot of them who have now emerged after the result, intriguingly. You can imagine the vitriol that I received. You've all got those battle scars too here. But for Conservative politicians, supposedly right-wing politicians in the United Kingdom, to be coming over to the US and delivering leaflets for Kamala is astonishing. In response to the brutal murder of 3 beautiful young girls aged 6, 7 and 9 last summer, the government covered up the terrorist elements of the case. The Labour government continues to shamefully deflect blame from the killer himself, the murderer himself, onto social media companies, internet platforms, and Amazon, where the murderer bought his knife. So in the name of multiculturalism, politicians of the 3 main parties have consistently refused to address the elephant in the room, that millions of people coming into the UK do not have our best interests at heart and refuse to assimilate. Too many immigrants into the UK refuse to learn English. They refuse to wear Western clothes, and many do not want to embrace the Judeo-Christian culture that defines and founded the United Kingdom with all its wonderful freedoms and opportunities. And the reason I feel so strongly about this is because I know the power and good that Britain brings to the world. My parents, born under the British Empire, came to the UK with nothing in the 1960s. My mother was an 18-year-old girl when she was recruited by the National Health Service in Mauritius to come to the motherland to work as a nurse. And my father, kicked out by Kenya, came to Britain's shores, clutching just his British passport. A passport for him, as he stood on the tarmac at Heathrow Airport, aged 19, embodied hope, opportunity, and freedom. My parents built their life by revering Britain. They had nothing but gratitude and admiration for the British Empire and what our country symbolized to humanity. They worked hard, they saved, they integrated, and they were welcomed by the British. That's why the mass migration of today makes me so angry, because it's everything that Britain and indeed the United States is not. To many migrants coming to the UK today, they just want to take, whereas the controlled immigration of decades ago was much more about give. The truth is that Britain has imported a 5th column into our society, a column that refuses to integrate, refuses to abide by our laws, our customs, and our values. Just today, in The Times, an article written by a preeminent journalist has said that 75% of people on trial for murder at the Old Bailey, that's the main criminal court in England, are from black backgrounds from war-torn countries. 75% of those defendants. So I say to those who want to do our country harm, your time is up in the United States and your time is coming in the United Kingdom. We've all had enough. That means less rhetoric, less talk, more action, more arrests, more deportations, more convictions. Mass migration is an existential threat to the way of life in our country and to Western civilization. And the public, be it in the US or in the UK, have voted time and time again to stop it. However, there is some hope. The tide of this war has turned. As Churchill said, this is not the end. This is not even the beginning of the end. Perhaps it is the end of the beginning. Thanks to Trump, free speech, for all its faults, is in the ascendancy. The speed at which DEI and woke institutional policies are crumbling is accelerating, and the malfeasance of government and the mendacity of the administrative state are being exposed with frequent regularity. The prevailing consensus of how multiculturalism was nothing but a benefit is unraveling at pace along with many far-left ideologies. Progressive thinking is losing. It's losing with the young, it's losing with the old, it's losing with blue and white-collar workers alike, and instead is being forced to take cover in the liberal enclaves of Islington and San Francisco, where they weep at the fall of Justin Trudeau, Starmer's plummeting popularity, and the defeat of Kamala Harris. The re-election of Donald Trump by the American people heralds the potential that this war is winnable. Key questions will emerge. Will this inspire citizens in other nations stuck in this political ideology of the far left to follow suit? More importantly, what will happen in the West if it does not? What will happen if democracy is indeed thwarted by the existing political class? Vice President J.D. Vance said at the National Conservative Conference, at which I also spoke in the summer here in DC, that the UK was going to be the first Islamist nation with nuclear weapons. I don't think he was entirely joking. Is it an impossibility that 20 years from now, it will be the UK, not China or Russia, that will emerge as the greatest strategic threat to the USA, born out of a broken relationship and weak leadership? What happens if the UK falls into the hands of Muslim fundamentalism, our legal system gets substituted by Sharia law, and our nuclear capabilities vest in a regime not dissimilar to that of Iran today? Regardless of whether one thinks this is a realistic outcome, which I do not, should we not have the courage to ask these questions and look at where our country is heading? But now, thankfully, the tide is beginning to turn towards freedom. If the freedom revival fails in the USA, we all lose, and the loss would be irrevocable. Technology, digital IDs, controllable digital currencies, the absolute power of global institutions all paint a dark tapestry of perpetual servitude for the people. Sprinkle in robots and artificial intelligence, jobs become redundant, and people have no purpose. And falling birth rates around the world, shrinking of the world's population, and we're very close to a ruling class deciding that the masses are indeed superfluous, a drain on precious resources and a cancer on the planet's ecology, with the WEF and the Davos elite's desire to see population reduction becoming a reality. If the USA wins, we will once again have freedom, but the US needs its allies. It needs you, it needs us. It may not have Starmer and his woke socialists in the cabinet, but he does have a majority of British public opinion on his side. We must find the courage to shout enough is enough and act differently for our communities and at our elections, because only then will we have freedom.